going, everyone? It's me, Logan ISL, and welcome back to the Beginner's Guide. Yes, it is finally here, the much anticipated 4th edition, where I go ahead and talk about in detail as to what to do for your first Intense Tower in Johto. In Johto, people will struggle getting up to challenging, but when you get up to the intense difficulty, this is when things get insanely difficult. It's very hard to sight read towers at this difficulty, as jumps are more precise and mechanics get more complicated. So many Johto players hit a roadblock trying to complete their first Intense Tower. So today, I'm going to go ahead and help you complete your first Intense Tower and give you tips to move up the difficulty and prepare for the next difficulty, which is Remorseless. Oh, and by the way, did you know that Intense has the most towers in one difficulty in Johto? Yep, the game features, as of this video, 39 different Intense difficulty towers to choose from. Challenging is in second place with 36, so there is a wide selection of different Intense difficulty towers that this game has for you to try and prepare yourself for the Remorseless difficulty. Anyways, let's go ahead and answer a question that I'm sure many of you will have. When should I think about my first Intense difficulty tower? Well, if you do not have Ring 5 unlocked, that would be a good place to start. As many people know, it is a quite controversial opinion of mine as well, where I recommend players to get to Ring 5 before trying out much harder towers or World 2 itself. This is because the mechanics in later rings and inside World 2 are much more complicated, and before even thinking about getting your first Intense tower down, you want to have a good selection of areas to choose from. So you have more towers to choose from to go ahead and get your first Intense tower point. If you do not have Ring 5 unlocked and you need help doing so, I have my very own beginner's guide split into 3 different parts. Chances are, if you are joining in on the bandwagon late, you have beaten towers that I didn't do in the guide, and no problem. Take a look at the guide and fill in the holes and you'll be just fine. Links to those will be in the description below. In terms of when to think about getting your first Intense tower, you can really start trying as soon as you get your first challenging tower down or two, because it's something very cool that you can do with Intense towers and harder. So while you might have only beaten easier challengings and the idea of doing an Intense tower haunts you, don't fret. It might not be as bad as you think it is. It will still be very hard though. This guy will be taking a look at towers from rings 1 to 6 and zones 1 to 6. Yes, for those of you watching on release of this video, which is 95% of you, I meant zone 6. I'll explain later. Rings and zones from 7 onward require you to have an Intense tower beaten to access them. A little bit of a problem trying to beat your first Intense tower in a ring that you can only get to with an Intense tower point. Just note, what world you beat your Intense tower in will only get you into that world's area. This means if you beat an Intense tower in Ring 1, you will not get any help for Zone 7. Keep this in mind when you're trying to unlock Ring 7, as Spatial System towers will not help you. You will definitely want to hear me talk about the towers in the Spatial System that are good, and generally some will argue that the towers inside of the Spatial System are the best to do as your first Intense. I will leave this up to you, but you might want to think twice before trying to do a World 2 tower as your first Intense. If you're adamant on unlocking Ring 7, only listen to the towers in the rings. Vice versa if you're looking to unlock Zone 7. Okay, think you're ready to take on your first Intense tower? Good. Before we begin, there is something very important I want to talk about. Up to this point, it might have been hard for you to get here, but Intense is really where it starts to get to you. You're soon reaching the point in Johto where only those who spend the time and effort will be able to succeed. Moving on from this difficulty onto Remorseless is an insanely difficult challenge, so be prepared to be stuck here potentially forever and not be able to move forward. Personally, I was stuck at Intense for around 4 to 6 months before beating my first Remorseless tower. It's not easy. Don't let this scare you though. Getting to Remorseless will feel very rewarding if you get there. And, well, that was some pretty bad news and started this guide off with a sad note. But however, I do have some good news. Are you tired of sight reading those pesky towers? Well, guess what? You now have the access to actually practice the towers. This is why I was saying getting into the Intense difficulty may be easier than you think. I will leave this link at the top of the description. Intense and Remorseless Practice Time is a game by Gameter, one of the game's very own developers. It's very well maintained and gets updates as soon as it needs them. To find your tower of choice, go to the intense difficulty side of the hallway, and then go into which world your tower is in. Find it, and bam! You're inside of the tower you want to practice. So now let's go ahead and talk about how to practice towers. In my opinion, it's always best to practice towers from top to bottom. So start at floor 10 and go to 1. If you're playing a newer tower, this means you might have to figure out what certain custom mechanics do on your own, but it's worth it. As you practice more and more, you'll start to care less and less, and you want to make sure that you have the end of the towers in lockdown. It's easier to get back to floor 2 and deal with a bad jump than on floor 10. To practice, some towers will have teleporter pads at the bottom of each tower, and touching those will take you to those specific floors. However, a lot of the towers don't have them, so you'll have to use the no-clip tool to go up most of the time. If you fall, no problem. Simply take out no-clip and navigate to where you were. Make sure you're standing up before putting it away. If not, you'll simply ragdoll and you'll get confused. Don't be that idiot that asks why the no-clip is ragdolling them. People will laugh at you. I personally split the floors into multiple sections as needed, and then I do runs of that floor alone until I'm able to do it consistently. Then I move on down. If I notice that there are some tricky floors in a row, I will do runs of those floors together to make sure I have it done with certainty. Continue until you're at the bottom, and then you're all practiced up. I recommend that after you finish a play session, if you notice a section you are bad at, do not wait later, but go right away to practice and finish it out. Don't also be afraid to practice while you're playing. If you are confused on a section or you think you need a new strategy for a part, look up the community guide. There's tons of them for each tower. And for the towers that I will show in this video, I will have the links to those videos in the description for you if you need them. If you want to see me practice towers in action, I will leave a video below where you can watch me practice a couple floors of a tricky citadel to see how I do it. Don't worry if you're somebody who doesn't want future areas spoiled for them. It's rigged too. So now that you know how to practice, which tower should I do? Well, I'm not going to exactly tell you which exact tower you should do. That's for you to decide. The cool part of Jeitou is to be free and to make your own wacky decisions in progression. I once had my hardest tower in Jeitou as Tower of Zesplus, which for those of you who are curious as to what that is, don't worry about it. When you try to do it one day, you'll have a good laugh at me though. So the way this will work is I'll talk about towers that are good choices as first intenses, and explain what sections are tricky, and I may recommend you to practice them differently than what I just told you. I'll give an overview of the tower, like the pros and cons of it, and give you some tips and strategies for each one. And then, you can make the decision in your head if that tower tickles your pickle. Then go on your way and try to beat that tower as your first intense tower. However, I would also recommend you though to check out 2 or 3 towers that interest you. Play through the trouble sections I mentioned, and maybe play them out a little more, and then you can make sure you're doing a tower that you actually like. I will as well explain some common mistakes some players make on picking some terrible towers as their first intenses, so you guys don't make the same mistake. Oh, and also, for those of you who don't have certain areas unlocked and don't want those areas spoiled, don't worry. I'll be playing the towers inside of the practice places so you don't get spoiled really at all. Without further ado, let's finally go ahead and begin talking about our first intense tower. Let's go ahead and begin with a tower that some of you may already be familiar with, Tower of Impossible Expectations. Some of you may already be familiar with this tower and might have played with it for the fun of it when you first played the game when you saw it was very tricky. But when the difficulty reassignments came along, people thought that this tower would finally get moved down to challenging, as many Jeitou players think that this shouldn't be intense. However, it didn't. It still remains at intense and will likely remain at that difficulty for the rest of this tower's life. So, yeah, it's intense. So that is one good thing about this tower, is that it is probably one of the easiest intenses in the game. Another good thing about this tower is it really doesn't have very complicated mechanics in it. It's very wide open for newer players, which can make learning it and having fun with it to be way easier, compared to some other towers that we will go over later in this video. Anyways, let's go ahead and talk about the tower itself now. Floors 1 through 4 can be rather annoying, and you're going to be stuck here for a little while, and it may frustrate you, but don't worry about it. Floors 5 to 7 are not as tricky, but however, you can still fail them, but they're definitely easier. Floor 8, however, is an absolute nightmare, and Floor 9 has one thing that I'm going to talk about here in a second. In terms of strategies and things that you need to know, on Floor 3, when you reach this split path, follow the left direction. This is a developer skip, and trust me, you do not want to have to do the legitimate way. Once when you get to this truss, however, you need to hold W once when you reach the top, hold W and D to glide on top of the truss, and then tilt your camera to land on the truss. This is something that is going to be confusing for many people, but however, this is a tower that will help you get used to it. This is a mechanic you'll see a lot more in later towers in Johto. In terms of Floor 3 outside, you don't need to do whatever the heck this is, and you can just go ahead and climb up easily. In terms of the trusses, you simply need to do the same thing as before, but simply walk around the trusses this time. Floor 4, though, is where this tower really can be annoying, and you might get here a lot and start screwing it up. Once when you reach these thin studs, do them across like this. You'll be able to traverse them with little to no problem. Once when you reach this structure, however, you want to go up to the left, climb up here, and jump through. This section is probably one of the hardest parts of the tower, and is definitely going to cause you multiple problems. On Floor 5, you'll see a barrage of kill bricks. These things are definitely going to annoy you, especially when you are trying to jump on these half stud sections. Ignore that these kill bricks are there, and try to go a little fast. I recommend you hold space and go ahead and navigate through this part. This part can get annoying. Remember once when you get to the trusses that you can use that to heal if you need to. On Floor 6, you'll see this terrifying multiple kill brick spinners like spinning. Just simply time it. It's really not that hard. Get on top of the wedge and then just walk. You won't have to worry about it at all. On Floor 7, once when you reach this construction like spinning thing, it's this massive thing, you can actually head to the right side here and actually climb up the truss. This is a developer made skip and is allowed. Floor 8, though, is where this tower gets its intense difficulty tag. Up to this point, this tower isn't that bad, but Floor 8 is definitely where you're going to have some problems with. And what part of the reason why that some players don't do this as their first intense tower is very much because of how raging-inducing it is. On Floor 8, you have this moving platform. However, unlike before, you have to jump over it and do some special obstacles. This section can be very tricky to learn, and can easily get on your nerves. And also, this tower makes you do E-Dance 2 glitching. So if you don't have that down, well, I talk more about it inside of my beginner's guide video on Tower of Overcoming Hatred, which is in part 2 if you need instructions on how to do that. You can try to corner clip, but I find it harder. However, the main reason why this tower is intense is because of Floor 8 outside. Oh my god. This section is straight out of hell. Pretty much, you're over nothing. If you fail this, your run is over. And you have to go ahead and deal with these Can Collide True kill brick walls. Simply follow my instructions that I show in this video, and then go ahead and try to practice this part yourself. It is straight out of hell. Floor 9 will go ahead and greet you with a massive problem. This stupid spinner pendulum. This thing is really annoying and can soft lock you in a real run. So if this thing gets stuck in a down position when you fall, just restart your run immediately, because there is no way to get this stupid pendulum to get back up. It's really annoying. Anyways, my strategy that I recommend is to get on the second rung on the left side, go completely horizontally, push it, and find the timing to jump. This section is extremely annoying and will definitely frustrate you after going ahead and completing the outside. I would highly recommend when you practice this tower to begin practicing this. However, one massive pro of the tower is how Floor 10 is just a simple truss. That's it. There's no gameplay up here. And make sure you go on the back of the truss. If you don't, you will get killed by a bunch of kill bricks. The only good news I have for you is at least you'll get a badge. Alright, the next thing we're actually going to talk about is a steeple inside of the Forgotten Ridge. It's known as the Steeple of Huge Pain. If you're somebody that wants to go ahead and get into wraparounds, this tower is a good option because this tower has more complicated jumps. However, this tower is not a low intense, it's closer to low mid intense, and 2 floors of this steeple are netted. So do note, because of this, the gameplay overall in this steeple is much more difficult. Not only is it harder than Impossible Expectations, it's also shorter, and the first 3 floors are the main issue. 4 and 5 are net heaven, and you don't really have to worry about those floors as much. So do be warned that if you do decide to go with this option, floors 1 through 3 may get you really mad. However, you may think this is a better idea because it's less gameplay for you to work with. But once again, like I said, be warned that the gameplay here is overall harder than what you'd initially expect. However, obviously go ahead and practice the safety nets. Personally, I have not beaten this steeple yet, so I don't know too much about it and what sections are hard or whatnot. But if this does interest you and you think you are interested in trying to go ahead and do this, there is a guide in the description. This is definitely a good idea for some, for those of you who want to deal with less gameplay. However, another thing you do want to think about is how this is only a steeple, which means you'll only get a half a point, which might not be worth for some, but that's up to you. Oh, and also, you will need to learn how to do truss flicking inside of this tower. Let me go ahead and give you a brief overview as to how you truss flick. Okay, so let me go ahead and explain to you how truss flicking works. So, once when you get to an area that you need to truss flick, pretty much what you need to do is you need to tilt your camera, jump, and then land, while holding W and in the direction you're going, like this. This is a technique that is pretty tricky to learn and comes with experience. As you can see, use the keyboard overlay to help you. I actually pressed D a little bit later, but a lot of people do it different ways and there's multiple different techniques. One technique I know of that some people use is they'll look like over and then like shift and go in. Personally, I don't like that, but that might work for you. But yeah, that's pretty much the basics of flicking. Oh, and sometimes when you try to jump off the truss like this, you can't because it's too high up. You'll need to flick up. That's how you do those sections. So, that's pretty much all you need to know about truss flicking when it comes to the basics of it. Sorry that I don't really have much to say. Like I said, I haven't beaten this tower, so I don't know much about it. However, I have gotten to the end of 3 before. But, simply put, that's pretty much all you need to know about this steeple. Practically, it has 3 floors that you actually need to worry about. It introduces truss flicking, but once again, it's a steeple and may not be worth your time. Like I said, up to you. This might be a good choice for some. Next up is a tower that I'm actually quite shocked that not many people actually do as their first intense. And that is the Tower of Holy Flip inside of Ring 4. This tower, I definitely feel like out of all of them so far, is definitely going to help you the most inside of Johto. This features a lot of things that you'll see in later towers. It has wraparounds, it has all of the mumbo jumbo that you're going to need. It helps you with precision, whole 9 yards. However, this tower is definitely a little tricky, and it may not be the most enjoyable. I'm not sure how this tower would be for beginners. This is one tower that I did back when I was around mid-high remorseless skill level, and I was able to do it very quickly. And I actually would have probably have done this as my first intense if I knew about this option. I really think that this is a great tower for beginners to think about. Unlike Tower of Impossible Expectations, this one definitely helps you more with more obstacles you'll actually see in the game. But nonetheless, I'll let you go ahead and see these troublesome parts, and then you can go ahead and make the decision if you think this is the best thing for you. One thing that can be a little bit tricky is trying to transition into Floor 2 outside. There are 2 methods to doing this. The first method is to go ahead and push all the way to the end, and go in first person and just simply walk off. However, if you're better at the game and feel like that this strategy is a little uncomfortable, you can go into third person, shift lock, go all the way up to the back, and then just simply wrap off. Oh, another thing that's important to note is that this tower does have quite a few unmarked conveyors, so you're going to need to memorize where they are. They can be pretty cheeky. Floor 4 outside also sucks. It starts from this annoying jump on a conveyor which can push you off the wall and into the void, so that's fun. And then you also have right away trying to do some of these very tricky and very wonky wraparounds. Just, ugh. And then when you get to the slanted part, go ahead and walk over to the side and then jump up. That is the easiest way to go. After that, floor 4 outside isn't too terrible. Now for something a little uncommon. In this pushing platform, you have to push it all the way to the left, and then to go ahead and make it to the other side, hold D and jump at the last second. This is known as a pushing platform reverse jump. It's a little wonky, but it's pretty cool. On floor 6, you have this stupid difficulty spike. These are tilting platform wraparounds, but the tilting platforms move around very easily. Land on them, wait a little bit, make sure that you aren't freaking out, and then transition to the next one. This section absolutely sucks and is definitely the best spot to check out first. On floor 7, this jump might confuse you, but don't worry, just treat it as like a little bit of a long jump. However, right after, you have this weird wraparound here. You could try to go ahead and climb all the way up to the top, but it is definitely easier to go in between the two studs, which can be pretty tricky. Definitely spend some time to go ahead and learn that. And on floor 9, once when you do this wraparound, you can go ahead and climb up that wraparound and go ahead and skip it. And then you have the most cruel part of the tower. When you get to here, make sure to go on these 1 studs. The kill rig platform will lead you onto a fake path. It's pretty freaking cruel. Finally, the whole floor of 10 is very bad and it's really annoying. It starts off with this unmarked conveyor, which you can easily bounce off if you are not careful. These stick-out wraparounds can be very tricky as you have to land on 1 studs. And right after that, 2x2 falling platforms into the worst part of the tower. These are really hard jumps, and if you fail them, you're going to go far away. Simply look down, and then go ahead and try to get the muscle memory for them. That is the easiest way to do these jumps. These are very annoying, and also extremely hard. And then finally, to end off the tower, you have 3 jumps that you have to do on the outside. Simply try and hold W to stay on them, but once when you hit the second one, you can just simply jump right to the wind pad. All in all, a very neglected tower to do as a first intense, and while this may have some annoying sections, this is definitely a great one to consider, as I feel like this will help you more in the game than some of the other intenses I may mention. However, it could be a good idea to try another intense first and come back to this one later. Okay, this is a tower that I can very easily tell you in 1 word. Tower of Extraordinary Adventures. Don't do this one. There are multiple reasons why not to do this tower. First of all, this tower has hidden buttons everywhere, and if you don't hit every single one of them, this tower will troll you at the wind pad. How fun does that sound to do as your first intense tower? Next, as well, this tower has safety nets pretty much everywhere, which sounds like a good thing, but the problem is the footage that you're seeing in the background is floors 7 and 8. This floor is pretty much remorseless difficulty gameplay, and it's straight out of hell, which is convenient because it's hell themed. This gameplay is just not fun, and is just, it's just terrible. And to finally seal this tower's fate, when the JTO team does pick up difficulty chart, replacement, whatever, replacing towers on the chart again, this tower is one of them that the developers have specifically said is on the chopping block on being moved down to challenging. So, that alone is a reason to not touch this tower as your first intense tower. So yeah, don't do this one. There's no reason to. This tower has an uncanny ability to explain itself in just 1 section. I really don't think I need to say anything else here. Next! Tower of Tokyo Heights. This tower is definitely good. This one is definitely a fun one, but it is a little bit interesting. Let me explain. So the way this tower works is only a very small section of the frame is actually used 90% of the time. Inside, you actually are safety netted pretty much the entire time. Every single floor there is something below you to go ahead and launch onto. However, this tower has multiple outsides in it which can absolutely destroy your run. That means this tower can get pretty frustrating and can easily get up your nerves. However, the reason why this tower is definitely a good one to do is it's definitely the one that will help you the most in the field. This tower has a bunch of long wraparounds, truss flicking, and has some a little bit kind of tricky client object usage at times. And it also might have some client objects that you're not necessarily have seen before or not too used to, like beat blocks and morphers. This one is definitely great if you can tolerate failing the outsides, because the outsides can be some of the trickiest parts in this tower. So let's go ahead and take a look over them. The first outside that you will encounter isn't too terrible. There's mainly one thing that you have to worry about, and that's this pushing platform. Jumping onto this ladder can be pretty tricky, and I recommend just going into third person, holding right click, and angle yourself in. That is, in my opinion, the easiest way to do it, but it can be a little bit of a problem. Oh, and be careful. As you saw right there, it looks like you're supposed to land on that, but that's a moving platform. Don't get juked out by that thing. You will definitely hate yourself if you do it. Oh, and you go into the glass panes, by the way, at the end of the outsides. Most of the time they'll send you there, so don't get confused about that. The second outside has many wraparounds close to each other. Two ways. First, you can wrap around, unshift block forward, and then do the jump again. Just make sure that you're not touching a corner, because if you are, you can accidentally corner clip and lose your run. Or, if you're a little more comfortable, you can just use W and D to traverse. This is definitely harder, so be warned. Oh, and this tower makes you do glitches, so make sure that you know how to do your glitches. There's a corner clip, an E-Dance 2 clip, and a wall hop. In order to wall hop, simply position your character at the wall and move your alignment keys. This will make sure that you're facing forward. In between the two parts, go ahead and activate the alignment keys and you'll be able to get up. Make sure you're holding W and space throughout the entire duration to go up. Or alternatively, you can do a flat wall clip. You get in between the two parts of the wall and then just simply press shift lock. This outside isn't that hard, but it's just very uncomfortable and has some very wacky jumps. Because of this, this is an outside that players commonly fall. This is definitely an outside you want to practice a lot. It might not seem too bad in practice, but in a real run, you're going to get a little bit conscious here. Like I said, it's not too hard, it's just uncomfortable and might whack you out a little bit. The final two outsides are extremely brutal, and these are the ones that you're going to fail the most. This one, you have very long wraparounds onto one studs. This section is going to be very hard, but it is definitely good practice on getting your long wraparounds down. And then, it's time to truss flick again. For those of you who do not know how to truss flick, like I said, I went ahead and went over it inside of the SOHP section of this video. The final floor of this tower is definitely the one that has the most complicated stuff and will help you out a lot. This has some very tricky jumps, but this time, the truss flicks are not simple just destination to destination. This truss flick, as you're seeing right here, you need to flick and then go fully around. It's definitely weird. And for this one, you need to land on the left side. These truss flicks are a little more complicated, but shouldn't be too tricky to learn. And finally, that final damn outside. If you get into GG like this, do not try to go out of this using spacebar. Try to tap W and then tap spacebar, or else you will get launched out of it. And then, go ahead and do it the right way. Make sure you practice these jumps the most. You're going to be very nervous, and those flicks are going to be hard when you're nervous. Because right after you do those flicks, you are done with the tower. Definitely without a doubt, practice the outsides first, and if you're able to get good with them, then definitely consider trying to attempt this tower, as those outsides are most of the difficulty that this tower has to offer. If you don't do this tower as your first intense, you should definitely do this as one of your first intenses. This is a fan favorite in JTOW, even if those outsides can annoy the hell out of you. You might see this tower upon entering Ring 6 and notice that it's baseline intense, but don't do this one. This tower is even more brutal than Tokyo Heights when it comes to its punishment, and its final floor is long and extremely difficult. This tower is definitely not a good one for beginners to touch. A Ring 6 tower I can recommend you to try out though is Intense Solar Chaos. This is definitely a tower, in my opinion, that's definitely a good idea. This tower is definitely one of the more easier intenses in the game, but however, this tower features more modern mechanics and obstacles. Sure, it's nothing crazy, but at least it's something. And if you're trying to go ahead and try to deal with more difficult and modern day towers, this is definitely a good one to at least get your foot in the water as to what to expect. This tower's troublesome spots are floors 1, 2, 3, but however, those floors are mainly just overall difficult, and there's really no section there that I can really show you. However, if you definitely do need help with a certain jump in that section, remember the videos are below. But however, this tower for the most part is really nice, and this tower has a couple floors in it that are absolute freebies. So that is definitely something that is very helpful. All in all, this is definitely a great choice for a first intense if you're looking to go ahead and get more into the modern areas of the game. With the additional advantage that this tower is considered most of the time to be one of the easiest intense towers in Johto. This and Impossible Expectations are commonly thrown around with the easiest intense tower tag. In terms of sections to worry about in practice, on floor 5, when you see this moving cup, you want to get on this sucker very quick because it moves around very quickly. So be very careful that you don't get screwed. Another thing that you're going to want to watch out for is there are 2 sections inside of this tower where you're forced to push a box. At the end of those hallways, you'll see this turret spewing out bullets. Don't touch that turret. That is an insta-kill. Use the push box to block the beam so that you're able to walk across. And then if you fall below and get teleported, do not respawn the box. The beginning of floor 7 may drastically confuse you when you reach this weird area where you see a tightrope that goes into the wall. If you go on this tightrope, you're going the wrong way. Go on the top right hand corner of this block here, and this vine spinner will grab you. You may need to move a little bit. Look towards the landing area, make sure you're in shift lock as well, and you'll be able to land there with a convenient timing. This may take you some practice in getting used to, but however, just please don't get confused by that stupid tightrope and think that you have to jump on the vine like I did. After you complete the push box challenge on floor 8, you'll see these weird UFO looking things. Do not stand on the balls at all. You need to make sure you're on the outside, because if you're on the sphere while these things move, you'll simply be taken off of them. So yeah, definitely do be careful here. Floors 9 and 10 are overall a little bit more difficult than the rest of the tower, and definitely have some more tricky jumps, but some jumps that I definitely want to go ahead and talk about are these stickouts. These ones that stick out are kind of slanted up, you need to be moved further back than you may think in order to go ahead and access them. Finally, on floor 10, for some reason Gameter thought it would be a good idea to put these very long sphere jumps to each side. The best way to do it is to face the wall, go ahead and get towards the edge but not exactly, deactivate shift lock, and then go for the jump, but right before you land, press shift lock again. This is the easiest way to make sure that you'll be able to land on these jumps. They are definitely not consistent and are going to annoy the absolute hell out of you, but that's the best thing that I can go ahead and give you for. Oh, and then the last thing we need to talk about is the wind pad. Yes, you heard me right, the wind pad. For years, this wind pad for some reason has been bugged. And when you get here in game, you will have to stand here a while before this wind pad activates. I have heard many stories of people standing here for over 5 minutes and sometimes even 10 minutes for this wind pad. So this wind pad might frustrate you a lot if you beat this as your first intense tower. So that might annoy you. Other than that, Intense Solar Chaos for the most part is relatively simple, and it really doesn't have a bunch of parts that really consider you as unfair. Okay, those are the towers that I suggest for beginners to do as their first intense towers in World 1, as well as the common mistakes. The easiest intenses that I have listed here are Tower of Impossible Expectations, Tower of Intense Solar Chaos, and Tower of Holy Flip. But it depends on who you are, of course. If you're looking for an easiest tower, then those are your best options, but those towers may not help you the best at getting better at the game, which is why I talked about other towers. But those are the World 1 towers. Let's now talk about World 2. World 2 towers are newer, which means some of them can be super complicated, so these towers may not be the best options for some, as some of you guys can consider them very confusing. Another thing is the lower end intenses in World 2 are harder. As time has gone on, the definitions of the difficulties have changed, so a low intense inside of Ring 1 is going to be considered challenging if it was placed inside of Zone 5 today. However, don't let this exactly scare you off, as some of these are actually really great intense towers. So let's go ahead and talk about them, shall we? This one I'm really on the fence for. So I'll go ahead and let you guys go ahead and figure this one out for yourself. And that is Citadel of Green Stuff. For those of you who do not know what a Citadel is, this is a tower with 11 to 25 floors. And these towers give you 2 tower points upon completion. So this gives you twice the amount of grub, if you will, upon completion than what an actual tower would. And according to the difficulty chart, this is the easiest Citadel in the game. However, there's a problem with this Citadel, and that's its gimmick. The way this Citadel works is that every couple floors, it will send you off to the side to go ahead and do a floor or 2 that is safety netted. And then, you'll be connected back to the main pillar. The problem with this is that when you fall inside of the main section, say you fall down a floor, instead of falling down 1 floor, you might have actually fallen down 3. And falling down to the bottom inside of the main pillar is a lot bigger of a slap on the face because there is so much more that you actually actively have to worry about compared to normal. And plus, not also to mention, some of the harder sections in this Citadel are just plain out cruel and flat out retarded. However, it's up to you. It may be worth the extra pain for that extra tower point. So, I'm going to go ahead and show you the troublesome areas, and I'm going to go ahead and let you decide on this one. After the button challenge on the basement, the section to the actual floor is extremely annoying. Like, I really don't have many tips for you here, other than just know that this section is just annoying. These spinning platforms are really odd and can be really tricky to land, and right afterwards, these shovers that are on this tightrope are really annoying. This tightrope isn't aligned, so you practically have to be in first person and use your peripheral vision in order to figure out when that shoving platform has passed. And oh, by the way, this shover is very precise. And then after that, you have to do this weird conveyor into the actual pipe to send you back up. This section is just annoying, and it's definitely going to go ahead and get up on your nerves. Right after the basement, you have to deal with this pretty weird section at the beginning. First of all, when you go with these trusses, just go ahead and climb on top of them. But then you'll reach this stick out. There are 2 ways to do this stick out. First, you can go ahead and do this stick out legitimately, which can be pretty tricky. Or you can go ahead and just skip the stick out entirely with this pretty precise skip. It's really a matter of what's easier for you, and this is something that you'll have to find out. Then, this tightrope. Go ahead and just follow exactly what I do by going to the side and then going ahead and repositioning myself. This section is really, really bad. The next floor, you'll have to be able to confront this pushing platform. The density of this pushing platform is very weird, so it's kind of tricky to control. There are 2 ways to deal with this, though, on the dismount. You can either wait for the spinner to get there in a line and go ahead and walk onto it, which is harder, but the easier way is to simply jump out of it. This might be a little bit tricky for some, so you might have no choice but to actually go ahead and walk onto the spinner. But pretty much all you really do is stay in shift lock, tilt your camera, and then just go ahead and go for the jump. These 3 spinners just flat out suck. These are absolutely terrible, and it's the first thing that you want to check out upon the tower itself. I have nothing I can really talk about here. These things, I don't know. I know they used to. Could get into a position where you can't even land on them anymore, making you absolutely soft locked. And these are near the end of the Citadel. So, Yeah, this section's pretty fun. At the very end on the top floor, you'll have this moving platform. For the most part, it's easy, but the second move, where you have to go ahead and wrap around this, is pretty dang tricky, and is, in my opinion, the easier way, instead of going ahead and trying to time this like a squeeze like the Citadel wants you to. Finally, near the end, you have this ladder wrap. In my opinion, it's easier to go ahead and grab this from the back side, but some will try to go ahead and grab this directly from the side. This is a common choke point. Oh, and my last tip for you on this floor is that kill brick that's spinning around. Don't rush that thing. When it gets near you, just sit and wait and let it go ahead and tank you. Make sure you have some visibility ahead of you though before you continue. And well, that's practically all I really have to say. This Citadel is extremely annoying, and I'll let you decide if it's worth the extra tower point or not. Not only is this tower a very low-end intense and one of the easiest intenses in the game without a single question at all, this tower is a common fan favorite inside of not only Zone 4 where it's located in, but the entirety of the game. This is tower mechanically induced mayhem. And oh boy, this tower is a little bit interesting. This tower really doesn't have many very complicated jumps that you actually need to worry about. This tower's main difficulty comes from its complexity of its mechanics. So if you're a brand new player fresh out of unlocking Ring 5, this tower may not be the best option for you to go for, but still, go ahead and consider it if you want to go ahead and do it, however. There is one massive pro to this tower. Floors 1 and 2 are net heaven, and floors 9 and 10 are saved by a net. So practically, 4 floors of this tower are floors that you really don't need to worry about that much. But still, of course, go ahead and learn them. The 6 main floors that you actually have to worry about, they can be pretty tricky, but they're not that bad. Once again, it's mainly the complexity of this tower's mechanics. Because of this, I really don't have many areas to show you. The only floor that I would say could be a massive problem is floor 8, going into the safety net on 9. This section that you have to do this floor inside of 70 seconds because the wall above you will slowly close. This section will take you a little while to learn. It's pretty hard to go ahead and get down, and is definitely a section that's going to get you pretty mad. Oh, and if you're curious, if you fail floor 9, it teleports you to floor 7. So if you fail 9 and 10, you'll have to do this every single time. This tower is a great choice, and is the easiest intense tower inside of the spatial system by a mile, in my opinion. So if you decide to go for this one for the spatial system, which it is a good choice to go ahead and do so, I would highly recommend going ahead and actually checking out the guide in the description below before you even enter this tower. Because it is best to go ahead and know what you're doing before you even try and practice this thing. This tower is very complicated and has a lot to it, so I'm really not going to show too terribly much. Oh boy, Tower of Haiwanakaza, yes, that's how you're supposed to pronounce it in Japanese, in Zone 5. This tower is a fan favorite of Zone 5. It is a brand new area, and this tower has been having tons of love. And it's safe to see why. This tower does a great job of keeping its gameplay very balanced, and overall, there isn't many at all when it comes to complex mechanics. It's mainly just wraparounds and trusses, which, with that being said, if you're somebody who isn't too familiar with truss flicking, this tower will easily get on your nerves, and as well as wraparounds. This tower has wraparounds, tons of them. If you're looking to get better at wraparounds and you're at around the intense skill level, this tower is absolutely perfect for that. Because, oh boy, there are all sorts of different types of wraparounds that this tower features. It is absolutely insane. However, this tower's gameplay, as you may easily tell, is definitely a lot more difficult than other towers that I have presented. So why is this baseline intense? Well, this tower has multiple safety nets throughout its entirety, which pretty much means every couple floors, you have a permanent safety net which you can use to your advantage. This means that after you practice the tower, as long as you do not give up, you will be able to do this in one play session, unlike many other towers that I haven't mentioned so far. But like I said, that's if you don't give up. In terms of spots to learn, this tower for the most part is fairly simple and is fairly balanced. And I personally, when I went through and beat it, I didn't find anything ridiculously difficult. However, between floors 6 and 9, it is apparently a hell zone. Because there's apparently, like, some very tricky jumps there that I never really noticed. And it's 3 floors without a safety net, for crying out loud. So make sure you practice this very well. In terms of practice, I would highly recommend that you just try to do each of the checkpoints in this tower once. If you're able to do each of these once, you'll be able to come in and beat this thing. This tower is a really good and very highly fan-favorited tower, and it's safe to see why. It's very open and fairly easy to get into, while also being very forgiving, while giving that difficulty spike that everybody wants. However, there is one thing that is important. Keep in mind, Zone 5 is a brand new area, which means difficulties are not exactly final yet. This means that this tower could get moved down to challenging. However, I am not too exactly sure if that will happen. So definitely keep your eye out if you're watching this a little bit far in the future and you want to go onto this tower about that. However, there is one massive con with this tower, and that's it's located in Zone 5. Why is this a problem? Requirements in unlocking zones are way harder, and this means that trying to get to Zone 5 without beating an intense tower is going to be immensely difficult. So unless you play this tower and absolutely love it to death and you are certain you want to do it, I don't know if this is necessarily your best option, because unlocking Zone 5 is going to be very difficult. Other than that, this tower is absolutely amazing, and is definitely an amazing choice and a great contender depending on who you are on doing your first tower inside of the spatial system as intense difficulty, without a doubt. Alright, let's go ahead and now talk about the Tower of Guided Trials, and this one I think is not a good idea. This tower is the longest tower in the game. It's around 40 to 50 minutes long. It's absolutely ridiculously long. And plus, you are not necessarily the demographic that this tower is necessarily for. This tower is best suited for people who are way higher up in the game, like Remorseless and onward, to be able to sit down for quite a bit of time and have a nice and relaxing adventure. This tower has tons of safety nets, and it's really hard to lose tons of progress on this tower. But however, despite that, I really don't think newer players will have a good time with this tower. This tower is rather mixed among the community if it's any good or not, and this tower has some really questionable sections that are really bad. But however, some of you may just go, hey, this tower will definitely be great to do in one session, which it is, it'll just take tons of time. I'm gonna do this anyway. Great! Make sure you practice Floor 9 and onward. Floor 9 and onward absolutely sucks. By far the worst part of the tower. Floor 9 is really annoying, and it's really dumb. But, like I said, I definitely do not think that this tower is great for beginners to do, even though that this tower is one that you could literally sit and do with absolutely no practice at all and go through it in a little while. Might take you like 5 hours or so. This tower is really, really useless at getting you better at the game, as the difficulty comes from length rather than actual difficulty. In my opinion, this is the worst intense tower to do in the game for a first intense, simply because that this will absolutely help you with nothing really, other than tolerating lengthy towers, which you really don't need for JTOW at all. Okay, let's finally go over some additional content that will be coming to the game in the future that is important to talk about in regards to going ahead and actually having a guide that will last well. Let's go ahead and first talk about Citadel of Heights and Depths. For those of you who may remember in the last video, I went ahead and talked about that I would be waiting until Cohad came out before doing this guide. However, I really think I don't need this Citadel to come out in order for me to tell you to stay away from this thing. Some of the people working on it have came out and just flat out said that this is the most annoying thing to work with in JTOW, because it's a very classic tower, while at the same time having some very modern and very complicated mechanics. And also, this thing is apparently super long, and just, like, this Citadel is flat out insane. It's insanely ambitious, and it's been in the works for 2 years. And in fact, this Citadel had so many mechanics in it that Jukeries had to go out and say that a lot of them had to be used in Tower of Oblivion, another project they're working on. Don't get me wrong, this Citadel looks super cool, and I am very excited for it. But in the context of newer players doing it as their first intense, this is an absolute terrible idea. And I think you guys would suffer with this more than anything. But yeah, no shade to Jukeries or anything. I'm very excited for Kohat, and I've been very excited for it for a very long time, but just not a good one for beginners. Simply said, this tower has a lot to it. There's a lot of complicated mechanics, but this citadel has a lot of interesting things that I do want to talk about in a full video sometime. But like I said, in terms of beginners, it is best to stay away from this citadel. This citadel is straight out of hell. Oh, and if you're curious as to what that background footage is, back in 2020, Jukeries showed off the first floor 4s of the tower. For those who are interested, go to Jukeries' channel and you can find it. But just, yeah, this is definitely not the best tower for beginners, especially with some of the preview pictures that we've seen. In terms of like the different things that are in there, it is just, Finally, let's go ahead and talk about Zone 6. As of this video, we have seen no images of it and no towers have been confirmed. And to be quite frank, no matter how good of an intense tower there is in Zone 6, don't go for it. This zone requires 45 tower points. You're going to be spending more time dodging the intense difficulty than more than anything else. So it only makes sense for you to go ahead and do some of the other intenses that I have mentioned. If you're trying to go to Zone 6 without an intense tower point, good luck. It is going to be a very hard task. No matter how good of an intense there is in Zone 6, don't go for it. There are some great intenses in Zone 4 and 5 that I've already mentioned that are great. Please do those and not suffer trying to deal with this freaking annoying 45 tower point requirement. Absolutely insane. It's not worth it at all. Well, with that is finally the end of the actual guide itself. So now let's go ahead and talk about getting ready for the Remorseless difficulty. Of course, check out some of the other intenses that I looked at in this video, as they will definitely help you a lot. Remember, some of the intenses I have shown are going to be pretty hard. So maybe you want to do an easier one like TOIE, Tomim, or whatever before moving on to some of the harder ones. In terms of actually moving up the chart, I have a few tips for you. Citadels are your friend. Every citadel except one in this game is intense or remorseless difficulty, and these things are lifesavers in terms of unlocking new areas. If you beat 2 citadels, that's 4 tower points, which can be super helpful in later rings where you need over 10 tower points to get the next area down. Take a look at the difficulty chart and see if it's within your skill range. If it is, do some research and go for it if you think it's worth it. Since these give 2 tower points, it may be worth suffering a little bit, which is the exact reason why I put Citadel of Green stuff in here. Spatial System tower requirements are from hell. Even though that Citadel will be annoying, it might help you a ton. I will tell you though, Citadel of Laptop Splitting is considered a must-do to the community. The reason why the Citadel is intense is because of the final 5 floors. They're insanely hard. Plus, this Citadel is pretty long. This is a great Citadel to do if you're newer to Intense, as this will directly show you what the late game looks like. If you can't handle this Citadel at all, good luck. Remember, this is around mid-intense, so make sure you have some done, like harder intenses that I've shown in this video, like Tower of Tokyo Heights, before thinking about trying to go for it. Plus, make sure you practice it hard, especially those last floors. For Remorseless difficulty, you really want to make sure you're a master of wraparounds, so another good choice is Tower of Extraterrestrial Enchantment in Zone 2. This tower, in my opinion, if you're ready for a mid-high intense or high intense, is a good one to think about. Great tower to check out after Citadel of Laptop Splitting, in my opinion. A great tower to get used to the tricky wraparounds that tons of Remorseless towers will force you to face. Also, remember, other intenses I said were bad choices were because they were not good for first intenses, so feel free to check those out now. In fact, Tower of Extraordinary Adventures is also great because of the Hell floors. Another great help in getting into the Remorseless difficulty. Make sure you watch a guide for those stupid buttons though. There are some other citadels that are good choices, but I'm going to let you to go ahead and try and find those, and ask around too. If you're looking for a tower of a specific difficulty, people will try and help. I have my own Discord server, link on screen. So go ahead and ask questions and such, and people will try to answer you. Also remember, this game isn't always about getting better. Make sure after a long grind to play some easier stuff so you don't go mentally insane. I've made that mistake more than once and worn myself out. If there's a low-end intense you see that I didn't mention in this guide, it's because I didn't think it was a good choice, and I never heard of many stories of people trying to go for that tower as their first intense, by the way, if you were curious. But feel free to check those out if you want to. Just be warned, some of them can be pretty bad. With that, thank you all very much for watching. As always, thank you to my members that for $2 a month or more to support this channel, and I wish you luck on your first intense tower. I will have a pinned comment for updates on newer things in Johto, or opinion changes, so make sure to check that out as well. Make sure to as well tell me what intense tower you did as your first. Best of luck everyone, my name is Logan ISL and have a good rest of your day. Bye bye.